The following podcast is sponsored by Structure Tech.
We had a friend that worked in tech. His dad was a home inspector. It still is in Colorado Springs. And he said, guys, my dad's software is so old and it's one of the best in the space. 25% of the inspectors use, and it just hasn't updated in 20 years.
Welcome, everybody. You're listening to Structure Talk, a Structure Tech presentation. My name is Bill Ulrich, alongside Tessa Murray and Reuben Saltzman. As always, the three-legged stool up in the Northland. And today we're balancing some really cold temperatures on top of this thing. But happy to be here. And on today's episode, we are going to have a conversation with Kevin Wagstaff, the co-CEO of Spectora. Everybody clap because Kevin's awesome. Can't wait to have this conversation. Usually at Structure Talk, we like to talk about and teach about all things crazy that we see in houses. But today we get to pick the brain of one of the technology leaders in the industry. And I'm super excited to get into this conversation. So without me dragging along a bunch of words that nobody wants to hear, Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of give us a little bit of history about who you are and where you came from? And please tell me why you decided to get into the home inspection industry from a technology perspective.
Oh boy, what a start. First of all, thanks for having me. It feels great to be on the other side of this dynamic. Typically, I ask the questions and then I just get to listen, and it's wonderful because I love listening. So I'm going to have a hard time talking about myself here. But anyway, my background, I guess we'll go as far back to say finance major. Thought I was going to be a financial advisor, a CFA or CFP of some sort. Worked at Charles Schwab for a number of years, and then got a job at Home Advisor, which everyone in our industry really loves. I know, right? I think everyone just is in love with Home Advisor in our industry. I was there on their SEO team. So that's where I kind of learned the world of digital marketing, how big companies actually get traffic to their websites. I learned about paid advertising. Great experience all around. Can't talk about the quality of the leads for any industry. Can't comment on that, but great time doing that. And then I did not wake up one day and just say, man, I really want to work with home inspectors. I really want them to tell us how bad our software is. We had a friend's dad, actually, believe it or not, Mike and I, brother, co-CEO, we had a friend that worked in tech. His dad was a home inspector. It still is in Colorado Springs. And he said, guys, my dad's software is so old and it's one of the best in the space. He goes, it's what like half or not half, maybe 25% of the inspectors use. And it just hasn't updated in 20 years. And I think there's opportunity here. And Mike and I knew we always wanted to start a company together. We did start female empowerment t-shirt company years ago, inspired by my daughter. But it turns out selling t-shirts at scale is really hard and inventory is not fun to carry. So we did that for a couple of years and it was fun and put some good messages out there. But then we realized, okay, we belong in tech because we're tech guys by trade. So we started doing some research and thought, hey, a smaller industry that's relationship based feels more appealing than trying to create the next Instagram or try to create the next subscription cat food service, any of the ridiculous stuff that Silicon Valley's doing and raising money for. We said, that doesn't really interest us. I don't have any interest in competing with Harvard or MIT grads. So we said, let's go small. You know, when we heeded some advice from like Paul Graham and some other tech people that said, hey, solve a small problem and then go from there. And I think you'll have a higher degree of success just in business in general, which I think home inspectors, to a degree, we all solve small problems and then we branch out from there. So that's how we got into it. Found us, as odd as that sounds and as cliche as that sounds. And then the other two co-founders dropped out. They weren't at the point in their life where they could do 60, 70-hour work weeks that Mike and I were doing for free, which every entrepreneur, everyone listening probably knows that first year is brutal in any new venture.
You had somebody approach you and just say, hey, my dad's a home inspector. His inspection software is ancient and antiquated, and I think you should write him software and then you could sell it to other people. And there's a real need in this space for new software. And you guys got together, you discussed it, and you said, let's do it. Am I missing a step here?
No, because our friend was a developer. So he said, let's all do this together. And his other coworker was a designer. So we were like, we have a dream team here because Mike's great developer, great marketer, designer. I feel like I'm decent on marketing, sales, customer support, that type stuff. And so the four of us started kind of doing research and kind of doing our due diligence and saying, wow, there is opportunity here. Like software as a service isn't really a big thing in this industry. It was all downloadable software, which when you look out at the rest of the world, you're like, oh, there's Pandora, there's Spotify, there's Netflix, all these kind of software on demand services. And we thought, why isn't it hit home inspection yet? And it made sense when you think of the broader real estate ecosystem and you said, you look at the tools that realtors had even 5 years ago, a lot of legacy, a lot of old school stuff where you're like, how come there's not a better solution for saying booking these showings?
Kevin, just for anybody listening who doesn't understand the term concept, the term software as a service, can you just define that real quickly?
Yeah. Basically, when you go to a website, structuretech.com, spectora.com, you're accessing something in the cloud, the nebulous cloud, right? It's a weird term. I get it. But basically, you're accessing something on the internet versus let me download this whole package onto my computer. And then it just lives on my computer. I can use it anywhere I go. But if I don't have my computer, I can't use this program. That's the opposite of web-based. That's just like local or downloadable software, which primarily existed, when we got in the industry with like the HIP and HomeGauge was all like, hey, buy it once, download it, you own it forever.
Mm-hmm. That's what we did forever.
And it made sense. And that's why I always tell people expect me to like bash on it, or inspectors will ask me. And I say, there's a reason why that has been the model, is because the rate of change in technology wasn't even close. It's grown exponentially over the last 20 years. If it took a couple years for any major technology to change, yeah, you should just build it once, sell it to people, and then let it run for years. That's just tough to do nowadays, right?
I don't know the answer to this. Does the accessibility of internet services affect software as a service too? Or does that not have anything to do with the viability of software as a service?
No, absolutely. That's absolutely a trend. If you look the last 10 years, the accessibility to not only internet, but high speeds just gets normalized more and more to where, okay, you can access it just as quick going to a web browser or loading up your mobile app than if it was a packaged like Microsoft Word, the Microsoft Suite's like the most famous downloadable, softwares ever. But now Google Drive, Google Docs, all these things that just seem to work well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But there's a time and a place for both. I think there's still certain things we download, but it's starting to feel a little more antiquated because you know what? All of our computers and phones get outdated in like 10 days, basically, which is kind of annoying for all of us, where it's like, all right, cool. I guess I need another phone.
I just have a general question for you, Kevin. I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm just curious if you can kind of paint the picture of like how many home inspection softwares were out there when you got into this, and how many of them are cloud-based like Spectora?
So when we got into it, we only thought there was like 3 or 4 because I spent time on the InterNACHI forums doing my research, saw a couple of them everywhere, right? And I was like, okay, it's only a couple big competitors. This feels good. We can just take some share and we can all, thrive. And then upon doing research, I'm like, oh my God, there's like 20 what I now call like zombie software companies, and no offense to anyone that uses them, but I feel like ones that their last update was probably 8 years ago, and their site just keeps sinking lower and lower when you search home inspection software. There's a reason for that. It's probably someone that's moved on to something else. You can just generate a PDF and it's simple. And that works for some people. But the more I found out, I was like, wow, there's a lot of software that was kind of created once and hasn't innovated. Because it is a fairly, I guess on the tech side, easy thing to do to say, hey, we're going to make a basic mobile app that spits out a PDF with text on it. But I think we all know it gets way more complex than that.
So Kevin, when you sat down with your 3 partners, your brother, 2 other people, and you're all getting into this, how far into the future did you try to look in terms of technology, thinking we're going to a mobile platform and we're going to leave the desktop behind? Or did you decide you were going to blend them? What was your framework to move into the future, especially with the change as rapid as it is now?
That's such a great question. So having worked at Home Advisor and my brother being deep into tech, I guess in our heads at the time, I'm trying to go back here and recall, I would say thinking 5-10 years ahead of saying, okay, we can't just do what's happening now. But then also looking at it through the lens of, okay, we know real estate and home inspection can be a few years behind maybe current trends. So it's almost like we almost had to think 5 years ahead to say, okay, mobile first should be a thing everywhere. And we think it could be a thing. We kind of took a leap of faith by saying, we didn't know how much resistance there would be to home inspectors saying, oh, I can't do all this on my phone. You kidding me? This tiny screen, there's no way I'm publishing on site. So we made some assumptions there that we tried to constantly check. So each inspector I took to coffee and interviewed, I would definitely probe and let's talk about what you do on mobile on site. But I had the agent experience. So I remember following along a home inspector, that used one of our competitors. So I kind of understood that okay, some of this is happening on mobile. But at least on that front, we knew more could be done on mobile because everything told us, hey, large part of inspectors doing 0 to 20, 30% on mobile and that's it. Because the constant feedback was, hey, I spend 2 to 3 hours at home every night. My family doesn't like it. And we're like, okay, that's a problem. And that's an emotional problem because I think people want to spend more time doing things they enjoy, being with their family. So we had to look ahead on that front. But then we also tried to look ahead in terms of like cost structure and how like ancillary services and upsells. Because I think it's a trend that hasn't quite played out yet. But we also thought, man, how come home inspectors aren't offering XYZ? Because I remember my home buyers always asking the inspector, hey, who do I call? You know, I'm going to need a plumber when I move in. You're telling me this. Who do I call? Some of them is going as far as, hey, do you have any insurance providers? Like, who do I go to for home insurance? And that's an interesting one, you know, 'cause a lot of things inspectors traditionally were like, I'm not touching that. And we were always like, what's the deal there? Like, yes, liability, we get it. The typical answer, right? But liability gets disclaimed every day by everybody. We were thinking ahead of like, how come home inspectors don't have a network of quality, trusted contractors that they're sending leads to? And you cut out a home advisor, you cut out a middleman. That was always interesting to me.
I think I have the answer to that question. They don't have enough time to track down and monitor those networks of people. And contractors are notoriously, they step up when there's a job to be bid, and sometimes they slide a little bit once they have a commitment. And I'm not making a broad statement about the industry. I'm just saying there's a lot of really, really busy people. You try to get your talents as deep as you can into that prey so you don't lose it, and then figure out how can I balance everything else that's going on in my life.
The value proposition in recommending somebody kind of sucks because you recommend this contractor and they do a good job and people are satisfied and they're like, okay, he gave me a good recommendation, they did a good job, that's what I expected, wonderful. But you give out 10 recommendations and one of those is crappy. It's like, they totally screwed me over and you gave me their name and what is wrong with you? How could you? And it's like, I can't control any of that.
Yeah.
And it look really bad on you. And so often I think it's easier to just say, yeah, I don't know.
That's a great point. Attribution and minimal upside, that I've never, I guess, thought about it in that way. But you're right. If there's very little to gain and a lot to lose credibility wise, it doesn't set up well, which makes total sense.
I understand it. Now, having said all that, at our company, we do have an internal list of service providers that I spend a fair amount of time maintaining. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I get complaints, people come off of it. I just removed one today. I won't even say what field it was. No, I will, because nobody knows who's on there. It's private. It's an installation contractor who I've been calling and emailing for a month straight, and I can't get them to return a single call or email from me after giving their name out for, 8 years.
Did you say insulation contractor?
I sure did. So you know who it is.
Well, I just forwarded that list to a real estate agent who asked about it last night. So maybe I should send them an updated email.
Yeah. Tell them not to contact one of those companies.
Okay.
But yeah, so Kevin, I totally get why people might be hesitant. But on the other hand, it's like, why wouldn't you want to try to control that, help your clients out, and give them good people?
Yeah, because there's a couple big themes at play here. One, obviously, the lack of people in the trades, like that's been whittling away for so many years. And so they don't have to compete. So there's almost no incentive to be great at customer service because they're all backed up like months, right? Yeah. Like I know in so many hot markets, they're just like Denver. You try to find a good plumber, electrician, you're waiting for 2 months.
Yeah.
A bathroom remodel might be 6 months. It's crazy.
I blame that on the trades, this lack of people coming into the trades, because I think they haven't cast a vision that shows a young person how the hell they can come into these trades and grow a life and grow a career inside of it. They're just looking for somebody to do that job right now. And what they need to do is cast vision and show somebody a pathway to a bigger life. And they'll have people breaking down their door to come and work for them.
Sounds like they need a bill.
They need a bill.
Right.
Doesn't everybody?
But no, I agree with you. Like what InterNACHI in a way has done for the home inspection industry or any association that kind of shows you the vision and that like, hey, you can make a great living doing this. You can make 6 figures. You can make a solid living. There's nothing for that, I bet, for these other trades.
No, but again, they're busy. I mean, you got to prioritize, and getting that job is more important than vision casting for the future. Mm-hmm. You probably have to do it at the same time. The demographic of the home inspection industry, it's an older demographic. So when you're building technology, how much did that affect the touch and the feel and what your technology looked like once you delivered it to this group?
You're so good at this, Bill. That's such a great question. It informed so much because I was constantly the advocate for the average home inspector because my brother and, early on the other guys, and then even our recent hires in the last couple of years, they're technologists. They interact with cutting edge technology all day, every day. And I have to keep reminding them, that's not typical. That's not the average person. That's not the average 50-year-old guy in the Midwest. I said, and that goes down to button placement, to the words you use to describe something on a certain page. And I always tried to put on my 5-year-old glasses and say like, okay, if I'm a 5-year-old trying to figure out what to do next, what do I do? Or someone, I can't remember who said it, who always said, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And I've like stolen that with our team internally, like break it down to me to the simplest level. And we all have to get good at that because there's nothing more frustrating or annoying when like a person or a software assumes something. Lots of beta testing early on, lots of doing screen shares with inspectors of saying like, okay, what are you thinking when you're on this page? Walk me through what makes sense, what doesn't. Oh, I noticed you clicked there. Why did you click there? And then you start to hear like, oh, I was just trying to get to the template, or I didn't know how to turn this template into a report. I'm like, okay, cool. Make note of that. And trying to get that feedback early on is easy because you have really engaged people that are invested in you building a better mousetrap. A little harder nowadays because now you have lots of voices, lots of preferences. And I get how software can get bloated and become, Frankenstein software, as we call it, where it's like you just bolt on stuff and it gets harder to navigate. But I will say back to the core of always trying to think about, I don't want to say the lowest common denominator, but the least tech savvy inspector. Is he going to get lost and flounder in here? Can we account for that? Because, the tech savvy ones, they'll whip through everything and be looking for the next feature. That's fine. And then education resources. So I think I started YouTube channel, I think the first couple weeks in, and said, all right, as awkward as this feels, I got to get my face on there, clicking through things with people, talking through it, and hand holding. I just think there's no other way to do it with a service business or software than holding people's hands and just making sure.
Well, you guys have done a really good job of that. I mean, that's why you're on this podcast. If it's not obvious, if we haven't stated it, made it clear to any listeners, we use Spectora here at Structure Tech. We've talked about it several times over the past year, switching our software over to Spectora. You and I met the first time when I came on your podcast. That was probably about a year and a half ago. You've been doing a podcast for a long time now. How long has it been?
Maybe 2 years.
Not that much longer than us. It's just like you've been doing it for a while before I even started. You're the old school podcaster in my eyes.
Maybe I'm not doing them often enough. Maybe that's the problem. I go weeks sometimes where I'm like, other things come up, and then you got to find a guest. And but I'm having the team help with that now. But yeah, we're about the same.
What prompted us to have you on here, because I mean, like Bill kind of teed this up, saying normally we have people on here talking about houses, but what really intrigued us was just the other day, we were talking on our team about the tech support at Spectora, and Eric, our lead inspector, was talking about every time there's any question that needs to be answered, like how do you do this, whatever it is, he said he has never dealt with a company in his life who is as responsive, as quick and motivated, and has the same level of energy and passion and drive as the entire team at Spectora. It's not like he's got one person he gets in contact with there, like, talk to Joe. Joe's really good. It's like, no, talk to anybody at Spectora, and they're all just fantastic. And as he's going through this, I started thinking, man, we got to get Kevin on our podcast just to talk about company culture. I want to hear what it is that you did to get your company to this level. I segued into a totally different conversation right now. Really, what I meant to ask you, hold up, we got to talk about your culture in a second, but first, you're talking about home inspectors being slow to learn. Let's not mince words. I know what you're saying. I got to ask you, have there ever been any home inspectors where you just had to tell them, I bet you'd be happier using a different piece of software? Has that ever happened?
Yes. And you all probably relate to this very deeply because whether they're slow to learn or they're just really, really struggling, we rarely give up on anyone, first of all. A lot of times it's like, we see it as a challenge. Those are the most valid, those feel the best when something clicks and you heard from someone every day for a month, 2 months, and then they just go away. And sometimes you check back, you're like, are they still with us? Like, okay, no, they're doing inspections and they're not reaching out to us. And that feels great. So learning curve, we've worked with, trust me, pen and paper to us. So you're talking going from 0 to 100 in terms of software. can deal with that. There are people though that there's just certain quirks with the software, or it's a little different than their mental models used to, and they just can't get over it. And they just say, I absolutely need this pixel to be 5 inches over, or else I can't use you. And they really start beating us up over it. Those are the ones where it's like, maybe we're not the best fit, and that's okay. I've trained those lines into our whole team because early on, I really had to say that a lot, and it hurt because it's like as a home inspection company, you want everyone to be your customer. Anyone that talks to you, you're like, okay, you should be a customer. But then there's ones where you drop that line, and the irony is they end up wanting you more because like, oh, wait, you don't want me? Well, I want you now. Just like when you said, we might be a little, we know we're not the cheapest home inspection company. You guys are famous for this. And it's like, but here's what you get for all this. And here's why we're quality. But if we're not a great fit, that's okay. Then they're like, all right, well, where do I book the inspection?
Yeah.
Probably heard, I guarantee y'all have heard that dozens and hundreds of times.
True. I think, there's psychology behind that. Once something becomes scarce, it's
wanted more.
It's wanted. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Let me just back up a step. When did you have your first customer? How long ago was it?
Great question. So that was, I still remember like it was yesterday. It was February 2017.
Okay.
I went into the Interachi forums January 17 when we launched, took some punches, body blows, got body slammed. And then February, I think someone was like, all right, I'll give you a trial, sign up.
So how many customers do you have now, Kevin?
We just crossed, I believe, the 4,000 mark the other day.
No.
Wow.
Yes.
No.
In 4 years?
Wow.
That's amazing.
Our industry obviously is notorious for poor reporting, poor statistics, because like the Bureau of Labor Statistics can't even get it right with what a home inspector is versus like a building and code inspector, which I think is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. But, Internachi has 26,000 members, but we know that all includes a lot of hobbyists and a lot of guys that just do their neighbor's house every now and then. So your guess is as good as mine.
Okay.
Yeah. Reuben, how many members are part of ASHI then?
I think it's around 8,000 maybe.
And there's a lot of people that are members of both, right?
Yeah.
You got both. And I mean, with the Internachi number, I could be wrong about this, but what I've heard, the way they describe it is that once you're a member, once you've been a member once, you are added to that number, and the number never goes down. I don't know that those are current. I could be wrong. I mean, I might get myself in trouble.
Oh, well, we probably have 15,000 users if we're going by that number. Yeah. Who knows? All the people that have gone out of business.
Yeah. So I don't know, but the number I've heard thrown around there most often in the US is somewhere in the neighborhood of 20,000, but who knows? Let's just say it's 30,000. You have a ridiculously large slice of the market, Kevin. After 4 years. I mean, that just talks about how good of a job you guys are doing.
See this hairline? It's a little further back in exchange for all that. A lot of long days and nights, but yes, no, it's been great. And I think consistency, you got your guys, so many parallels, I think, with high quality operators, just like you all, where you show up every day, you do the right things, and then you kind of just look up at the scoreboard after a year or two, and you're just like, oh, wow, like hard, this is paying off. And there's no magic magic bullet. We have competitors coming up, nipping at our heels now. And it's just like, okay, great. Keep doing your thing, and we'll keep focusing on where we're going.
So in 2017, it was just you and your brother, or did you have anybody else on board at that time?
Just me and Mike for the whole year. So we wore all hats. I think we had 200 customers by the end of that first year.
And how many people you have on your team now?
So now we have a team of 20.
Wow.
2 to 20. And so, man, that first year though, it was demos at 6 a.m., answering emails at midnight, doing demos whenever anyone would talk to me, driving all over Denver to just meet with people. And Mike would build features overnight. So someone would say, hey, I really need the template editor to have a copy feature to do this. I'd send it to Mike we had Slack for two of us, which is hilarious. Usually it's for a group, and it's just like, we had different channels.
Yeah.
We had like 5 different channels, but it was just me and him on all of them. So it was just kind of funny. We're like, okay, we're talking about business in this chat. But I would send it to Mike, and he would literally write back a week or two later, and he would say, hey, okay, tell Jim to refresh his browser now. And I would get back to him, and he would still be at his computer. And that would make him be like, this is amazing, guys. And that was kind of how we had to make our name, was like, we're going to react so fast because we really want to make something great. And we still try to do that to this day. Obviously, it's a little different, can't be overnight or can't be within 10 minutes, but that agility, I think, matters to people a lot.
You mentioned your scoreboard. When you sat down in 2017 and you rolled out a product, when you were looking at February of 2021, how many people as clients did you set a goal at?
I didn't think about 2021 at that time. I got to be honest with you. I was like year by year. It was like, well, I mean, the longest term vision we had was like, it'd be kind of cool if we could make a living, with a nice little software product, couple employees, and we could do that forever. That'd be great. And then each year is like we started to kind of set more ambitious goals, and inspectors kept coming, and we were like, okay.
Was 4,000 a number that you meant to reach and go beyond, or is it just mushroomed?
I do think after year or two, we started to look at the whole market and say, okay, InterNACHI's got this many. Okay, what if we could get to 5 or 10? What would that look like? And it just felt kind of like something in the distant horizon. So yeah, there's fantasy numbers we all throw out there as goals, but then there was like, it's funny in our annual goal setting every year, Mike's always like pretty ambitious up here. And then I'm always kind of like the conservative one. I was like, let's set it down here. And then we always end up somewhere in the middle. So we kind of complement each other in that way.
Gotcha. So you have 20 people on the staff now, and you're cranking out about 4,000. If you move to 8,000, does that team have to go to 40, or are you going to be able to do 8,000 inspectors or companies with, say, 30 people? Are you able to scale up?
That's a good question. I think we could do it with 30, because I think we really spend a lot of time on thoughtful like systems and processes. And that's not because we're wisdomatic. It's because we've had to, because we've had really inefficient parts of our business, just like everybody. We're like, oh my God, I can't have everyone asking me this question every day. I'm going to go nuts. We got to create a wiki, and we have to have Slack, and we have to have, Zapier, and kind of automate certain things within our business. So yeah, I think we can do that. I think development firepower is always at a premium, something we'll have to definitely add. And then support's something that's harder to scale, because I think we have such a high human touch. I want someone taking 30 minutes on a chat with a guy that's just learning the software, and that's his first touch point with us. And that's, most businesses would be like, no, that's terrible. You're never going to scale. I'm not too worried about that, because we're not trying to be Facebook. We're trying to provide high quality service. So it's totally quantity over quality. So I'm okay with that.
Well, and there's only so far you can scale. Start getting into something other than home inspections. That makes me think, what's next? How much could you envision getting out of this market?
10,000.
Okay. All right. So you get to 10,000. What comes next?
That's a great question. I think I fantasize about ways because I think of it this way. Every new home buyer, they have these needs, whether they go to the agent for it, the home inspector for it, or they Google it on their own. I don't know yet if there's some of those things that we can help home inspectors facilitate to just put it in front of them, not push it, not have liability, anything like that, of like, hey, I've got a partners page here. Check out anything you want here, whether it's a ring or a nest, or I don't know, a local handyman, like things that are very low, not to put inspectors in any hot water, but it's like creating that network to say, you know what? Now it's free to use Spectora because of you connecting the homeowner to this, or even making money using Spectora. That'd be ridiculous to me. It's like, if inspectors could make money by using us, we still get paid, but the homeowners are getting something they were going to go and find on Yelp or Home Advisor anyway. That could be kind of fun to do in terms of like, it's just not been done. I don't know, it's probably been done before, but basically creating that defendable ecosystem, because that's a business that can last a really long time. And Mike and I always try and take like a 10, 20-year view on everything we do. That's just kind of how we run the business, because it's just helps us make more sound decisions. And people ask us every day, like, hey, can you just tweak a few words so I could use this for my power washing business? Or can you tweak a few words in the online scheduler so I could use it for my property management business? So that could be interesting. But at this point, it just distracts us. We have so much more we can improve with the software and the experience and features to add for all different personas. And the more we start thinking about that, the more we're like, this takes our eye off the ball. We still want to be dominant. We still want to just wow people every day and earn our money day to day. And then that stuff will maybe present itself if the software is just chugging along nice and smooth and we're twiddling our thumbs, which will probably never happen. But
listening to you, Kevin, it's very inspirational, because hearing your thought process when you came into this industry of quick response and adapting and building the software that was needed on demand, and something that I feel like this industry probably didn't really have before you entered into this market. And I think it's great that you're embracing that and you're kind of cornering the market on that. And we need that. And same thing with home inspectors, like this whole industry, it's slow to change as well, And so one thing that I think we've even learned at Structure Tech in the last year is we were doing things a certain way for a really long time. And then when the pandemic hit, it gave us a chance to kind of take a step back and reevaluate and switch some things up and change. And we found that, there are better ways of doing things. And sometimes it's scary to try something new. Your software program, I personally, since I am not inspecting anymore, I'm out of the field and I'm doing the training and teaching and hiring and stuff now, but I've seen it just completely, I think really change the way that we do inspections, and it's given inspectors their lives back. It's allowed them to be able to report on the information on site and finish the majority of the report there, go home, do some tweaks and send it out, and then have their evenings with their families, like you said. And I mean, that's just invaluable, having that time. So so thank you, Kevin, for doing what you guys do and creating a great software and adapting and changing and being quick to respond.
Yeah.
Thanks for saying that. It says so much about you all, first of all, because when Reuben, I think it was Reuben or George, that were just like, hey, we're going to do this and here's our dates. I was like, wow, and they felt so calm about it. There was just this like calm decision. And I was like, wow, I guarantee they've done some behind the scenes planning and work, and they have a leadership team that can roll this out. It felt so buttoned up where I'm like, wow, that's amazing, first of all. So I was just like, I have so much respect for companies in the middle of a pandemic, maybe even during busy season. Things were ramping up again, I think. And you guys just did it. So that's really cool to hear.
Glad it sounded calm on the surface, because it didn't feel that way under the water.
We did have a plan. I will
Yeah.
say that. It was very intentional. It was a lot of meetings, a lot of thinking about this. But Kevin, I started down a path and I never really got to my question of essence, which is what really brought you on the show here. Is why is it everybody we talk to at your company is awesome? What got it to that point?
I have a feeling you all are going to nod your heads because it seems like you all have a similar culture. And I think especially at the highest levels of IEB, I think there's so many similarities. And so that's why like I've drank the IEB Kool-Aid, and like I learned as a vendor being at that conference, which is insane to think like that I got so much from it. I felt like I should have paid, an entry fee or whatever for it. Well, we did pay. We paid quite a bit, actually. Let's be honest. I always tried to think about that first week, that first month, when it was me putting everything into every single person I interacted with, and like the hunger and the quality, and just like that, my competitive attitude. I have a background in just athletics and some competitive person in general. So I translate a lot of my kind of athletic life to business now, because I'm a big Mark Cuban fan, and I think he always inspired me in terms of he played basketball till he wasn't good enough anymore, and then he just channeled all of that into whatever the thing was, and it happened to be business. And so that always stuck with me from day one. So that was kind of how I operated. But then I'm a people pleaser by nature, and that doesn't serve me well in certain parts of our business. Anyone that's ever gotten like a refund or credit knows that. It's like I'm not the best person to make those decisions, because I feel like I empathize too much. But then that is exactly what helped in the early days. And so Mike and I very much have this people pleaser nature to us. And I think that makes us not want to disappoint anybody. And that included every single one of our first couple hundred customers. And then that motor just kept going. And so I think people saw that. I think it took, we hired our first employee. I remember we were in that little shoebox of an office with her that we rented, for a couple $100 a month at a co-working space. We were there 10 to 12 hours a day, and she saw that and she felt it. I think lots of business owners can say, okay, once I hired someone, let me back off. I've arrived, or you can handle this. It just took so much intentional kind of like, no, you need to feel this. We can't just tell you what to do. Like, we're going to shadow on support for months. And I want you to read the words I use. I want to talk through why I'm saying this, like a lot of intentionality behind, there's a reason why I'm such a hype man for our customers. Like, it feels good for me to just encourage people and make them feel good. So there's a lot of that talk of like kind of this fluffy, nebulous stuff, instead of just like, no, just you robotically say this, and then you ask them if there's anything else you can help with. Like, you can have a checklist. You get that in a call center anywhere, right? But it's a lot harder to be a human in every individual interaction in every moment, and saying like, well, hey, how are things going, Reuben? Like, what is it like running a company this size? Like, what are your challenges right now? And that's hard to teach, that curiosity in each interaction and moment, because it's exhausting. Like, I remember it's like I would bang out 100 conversations in a day, and I'm like, at the end, I'm just like, dude, the button's right there. Like, just click it. It says click me. But I think that endurance, I think you all can attest to this in anything in life, whether it's relationship or business, that entrepreneurial endurance is something that you kind of have to show people and entrench in them. So that's a long way of rambling and saying, we talk about these values and things that are underneath the actual thing you're doing to talk about purpose and like without getting too fluffy, because you also hire someone and it's like, okay, dude, like I haven't drunk the Kool-Aid yet. Like what's my job? Just tell me what to do.
Mhm.
That's my ramble on that. But also I think hiring, we also don't just look for experience either. Early on, we kind of hired people purposely from different backgrounds, maybe that didn't have support or sales experience. And then we nurtured it and learned it together, as opposed to someone coming in saying, no, this is how I did sales at this financial software company. I'm like, very different home inspectors. It's a very different way to communicate, very casual industry. So I don't know if that answered your question at all, Reuben. You can try and ask it again and I can try again.
It's not as magical of an answer as I was hoping for. I was hoping you were going to have some magic bullet, like, yeah, we do this, or I read this book and I followed all the information in there to a T.
Oh, I do have a book.
Oh, okay. What book?
Delivering Happiness by the late, great Tony Hsieh. But that book imprinted on me a couple of years ago, kind of what I already didn't know I knew, but I was implementing of like, yeah, if they asked me to order them a pizza, I probably would have done it because I'm just like, yeah, whatever you need, dude. Yeah, I'll do that. So that culture of like, we're a customer service company that happens to do home inspection software, just like you guys are a service company that happens to do the home inspections. That mindset matters. I think that mindset can imprint on people when you harp on it that much and you say, you know what, our 1 minute response time, I track that. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to judge you based on this. I give it like it matters that much to respond quick as a human. So that was one big pillar, was like respond in under a minute, resolve the conversation on average under 15 or 20 minutes, and then get a happy face emoji as their response. When we close the conversation, it sends the inspector, how would you rate this conversation? And we look at those and we track them. You know, I obsess over them. If someone gets a terrible or bad, I'm sending them an email, just like you all probably do. Just like you follow up with like, what could we have done better?
That's brilliant. That's something even our older demographic will understand, the emoji.
Right. Just click them. Yeah. Happy face, sad face. One or the other. That's it.
No
Happy
explanation
face, sad face.
needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that really was a great book. I remember after reading that, that's what inspired me to add on our second client care coordinator back in the day. I just realized I don't want people on hold this long. We need to fix this. And it was that book that inspired me to do that, along with a bunch of other stuff. Such a good book.
Yeah.
So if I can paraphrase for what I heard Kevin say, is you get what you give and give more than you take, and you'll build a great team around you because people will be attracted to a culture that operates in that way. You didn't put up too many strict parameters on who's going to sit in that chair. We're going to learn together. We're going to walk shoulder to shoulder. And that resonates with people at a very deep level. And I think that's how you build a great company from the ground up, is you just care a lot.
I love that. Yeah. And we purposely always said, let's do things that don't scale. Because everyone, any company, everyone wants to talk about scale or what's the next vision or what's the end goal. And we're like, let's just be here and now. And if someone needs an hour to figure something out, let's give them that hour, because it's not always going to pan out. He may go out of business in a week. That's fine. We're going to live with the results of seeing things through and spending the time with each inspector, because it is a small industry. Might be different if our total addressable market was 3 million. I don't know if we could do that, but it kind of was a no-brainer to say, hey, we know it's not scalable. We know certain people would scoff and say like, oh, you're going to do chat support and just talk to someone all day. Like one guy that just hangs on there all day. It's like, okay, we'll draw limits, but until the problem's solved, like we haven't done our job. And that's what I try and tell them. It's like, this is not a volume game.
So Kevin, I have one last question, and we're going to have to do a wrap. We could go on for 4 or 5 hours because I have lots more questions, but what are you and Mike together or you individually going to do? What's your passion that isn't working in this industry? Like if you had to not get up today and work at Spectora and you could go do whatever you wanted, what would you be doing?
Wonderful question. Like I said, I have a background, played college basketball, played, a part season pro overseas afterwards. So I love the specifics of basketball and volleyball. So Mike and I play pretty competitive sand beach volleyball. So we played doubles beach volleyball. He got to just under kind of like a pro level when he lived in San Diego. He showed me the game about 7-8 years ago, and I've fallen in love with it. And so we play pretty much at one of the higher levels you can locally around here. So I obsess over the details of a sport. And so I watch AVP volleyball now, and I'm like pausing it and rewinding 10 seconds to kind of see their footwork and kind of where their shoulders are, every little detail, just like some people notice every little detail in the sport they watch. So I would coach beach volleyball because I feel like I dedicated like probably way too much of my life to basketball and just being in the gym and studying the greats and just paying attention to, where the hips are turned when this happens and little details, and just watch film over and over, almost to an unhealthy obsessive level. So I feel like coaching, if I could harness that with kind of my new wisdomatic approach of like letting things play out, letting people make their mistakes, and then being there to kind of guide, I would coach all day, every day. Just seeing growth in others, it's just something, I don't know, it's just fun. And like with our team here, so I love talking through a problem for an hour with someone and telling them the why, as opposed to, can you just do this for me? That's just fun. And I don't know what Mike would do. He'd probably just surf.
That's awesome. Well, one thing I can say is I bet your kids are extremely lucky if you have that coaching spirit at home. So that's a great story. Everybody, the voice you've been listening to is Kevin Wagstaff. He's the co-CEO of Spectora, and we've had the pleasure of spending the last 45 to 50 minutes just picking his brain. Thank you very much, Kevin. And we're going to have to put a wrap on this episode. You've been listening to Structure Talk, a Structure Tech presentation. My name is Bill Ulrich alongside Tessa Murray and Reuben Saltzman. As always, thank you for listening. We'll catch you next time.
For more information on how we can provide you with the right information about your home before you buy or sell, contact us at structuretech.com.